So, welcome to this, I guess, Nemesis tips video. I'm not sure what the title actually will be yet, but I'm sure you will know by the time that this video is out. This is the first installment, but hopefully just the first of many. This one features Steelheart's champions and Garrek's Reavers, but they may apply to many similar teams as well. For example, the considerations and suggestions I make for Steelhearts may partially at least apply to similar teams of 3-man warbands with strong melee-focused fighters, such as Morgoks or Iron Souls. And the suggestions for Garrek's Reavers may also apply to other large warbands, such as Garrek or Godsworn Hunt or what have you. But let's get going with Steelheart's champions. So the Steelheart's champions is a 3-man warband. They have 3 move, uninspired and inspired. They hit like trucks and they have good accuracy, but their objective deck in particular is very weak with only 9 objectives and only 2 searches, so they need a lot of complementing. So let's first talk about the Deadly Depths rival deck, which obviously is on its way out of rotation. This rival deck just feels a little bit too weak and underwhelming and too dependent on a rule set and a meta that is not present anymore really, namely abusing the cover hex meta that was prevalent during the Harrowdeep and NEMESIS seasons. Also, there is only 3 searches here, which makes it extremely hard to build a decent deck with, especially with earlier warbands or warbands from the Harrowdeep or NEMESIS seasons, with only 4 faction surges. The Shadeborn could probably make use of this one, and there's some synergy as well with the Cunning Crew, but even these warbands probably have far better choices than this rival deck from the early days of the rival format, basically. So let's talk about Steelheart champions. They only have 2 surges, as I said, one of which should definitely be a 2 glory surge that is killing your second fighter in the same round, which is pretty tall order for just 1 glory. This team really needs a strong rival deck with lots of scoreable searches to make them work. The team is defensively strong, slow, and hits like trucks with high accuracy, 2 or 3 hammers each. The weakness here is in the warband's objectives mainly, and its power deck secondly. An obvious choice for every hard-hitting elite warband is the Tooth and Claw rival deck, and that could certainly work well with them. A lot of the surges will be kill surges though, with little to no glory coming from passives, neither from this rival deck or the faction ditto. Embraced Savagery is very easy to score with an elite warband though, that is being savage on all of your fighters as a search, and Toyed with at least doesn't require a kill to be scored, that is after an attack action there is a vulnerable enemy fighter. With fighters on 2 or 3 hammers and 2 or 3 damage each, they should be able to carry such an aggressive rival deck though. However, cards like the Reckless Haste, Call to Heal, Natural Hunter, Mark of the Stampede will all be crucial to offset their weak movement of 3 on both sides of the fighter cards. Upgrades like the Feral Alteration is a no-go though, since it will make their fighters large and thus break instantly. So I think the Tooth and Claw is a decent pick for them, just be aware that you will have very little passive glory, so it will be a dice dependent deck, but with these guys who all hits on hammers and some of them with 3 hammers, you should be able to pull it off fairly consistently. Next up is Daring Delvers. You might be hard pressed with such a small warband to reach any real heights when it comes to your exploration count, and the juicy end phase cards here for 2 glory require 2 surviving fighters doing different stuff, or enemy fighters to be within 2 hexes of your friendly fighters, which both might be hard to achieve once you start losing 1 or 2 fighters. And you will, so I think let's move on. Fearsome Fortress could also work, but leave out the To the Walls card, is my opinion at least, because you will be hard pressed to hold more objectives than your opponent. This lets you be a lot less dice dependent than the Tooth and Claw, and with 2 block inspired on all fighters, staying on feature tokens should be right up their alley. They also have an in-faction guard ploy to double down on the synergy with Earthworks, and the general get on the feature token and stay there game plan should fit them fairly well. The range 4 attack upgrade is also a nice complement to these slow range 1 fighters, to not be kited too much. So I think it's a decent pick, maybe not the best pick, but it's certainly very playable for them. A Beastbound Assault is not really well suited for them, with both the surges and the end phases more geared towards larger warbands, even though Keen Collector is probably very scoreable. I think that's about it really. So let's move on. Seismic Shock is a spell focused deck and obviously a hard pass for these guys. Toxic Terrors could probably be made to work with all of the 2 glory end phases looking really scoreable with your upgrades spread across so few fighters. Though I would like them to have one or more really scoreable searches for this one to flow smoothly, and the lack of move improvements and or ranged attack action upgrades hurts a bit for these slow Stormcast fighters. That being said, I'm sure it's not unplayable, but it won't be my first pick at least. Voidcursed Thralls is an interesting deck that a lot of warbands can make use of, but giving up that sweet 2-block inspired hurts a lot and will, as a small but sad side note, lessen also the chances of Bright Shield's Furious Parry to proc. But on the other hand, cards like the Involuntary Advance, Zealot Imperative and Forced Movements is really juicy picks for such a static warband. Scoring the 4 glory end phase here is obviously very situational, but if you kill most things, and you should be able to, and Void Curse all of your only 3 fighters, which should be doable as well, this dark horse of a card is actually within your grasp to score. Still not my first pick for this warband. Paths of a Prophecy is probably a reach for this warband, even though it's not as unplayable as you might think. Searches like Held in a Bloody Fist, Hanging On, and Devoted Offerings are all solid picks for them. Prevention over Cure is probably doable as well. Is it optimal though? Probably not, but it could be a fun playing against type experience, and I do think playing suboptimally from time to time could really make you into a better player. Force of Frost isn't completely unplayable, since you can make yourself a wizard with this deck, but it's probably an even more masochistic exercise than the previous one, and at least 3 surges here seems way off for this warband. Breakneck Slaughter is a wonderful chaos of a deck, but with a little practice you can work around the randomness and steer it in your favor with some interesting card interactions like getting momentum counters and then handing them over before the impetus triggers, thus letting you push the opponent instead of vice versa. The +1 move to fighters with momentum counters is also a great boon for these slow guys, and none of the searches really seem unfitting for these guys either. 2 glory in the end phase for having a charge on your maximum of 3 fighters is a sweet auto score for these guys. So is Need for Speed, and Rapid Strike is also a really solid pick, skilling 2 fighters. The extra move and the very scoreable objectives makes this a great fit in my book. Malevolent Masks is a very flavorful and interesting deck, but I feel it's more geared towards larger warbands with more expendable fighters. With such a weak faction end phase deck, the reliable glory here is a bit too low to really compensate them enough. Alternatively, some of the mask upgrades could be really strong on a Voltron type warband such as Wrathgorn or Kanan or what have you, who can afford to kind of spend an activation to do one of the mask actions to get 1 extra damage or a reroll or what have you. So this could also obviously be the situation here for this warband once they are down to 1 fighter, but so I think it's not unplayable, but I don't think it's the best pick for them. So that's it for Steelheart's champions. I believe that Tooth and Claw and Breakneck Slaughter would fit these guys great, and if I had to pick one, I think it's probably the Breakneck Slaughter. I also think the Fearsome Fortress is a solid kind of dark horse option for these guys as well. I think the Fearsome Fortress is one of those decks that can really fit a lot of warbands. So let's take a look at the Garrek's Reavers. The Garrek's Reavers is a fast-paced, low-defense team, but with some aggressive punch in especially 2 fighters, Sake the Blooded, and the leader here, Garrek Goreblood. They all are 4 move, but inspire to 5 after 3 fighters, friend or foe, has been taken out of action. Objective-wise, they are at first glance in a slightly better spot than the Steelheart champions, with 4 faction searches and a couple of pretty decent end phases, mostly evolving around killing or dying. The searches are pretty lackluster though, with making your 3rd charge in the round your best bet, and even that one is pretty weak given how easily they die. I think the Grashrax's spoilers have something very similar. So it's pretty much only scoreable if you draw it in the first round, that one. Expect to lose 2 fighters per round with its warband, with 1 dodge on all guys and 2, 2, 3, 3, 4 for your wounds. And you should build accordingly. Khorne Cares Not and It Begins are solid end phases though, and probably about the only stuff you keep, so you need to complement a lot here as well. The power deck looks a little bit more promising with strong ploys, giving you accuracy, card to draw and out of sequence attacks, while Insensate makes you temporarily a little bit more tanky, which certainly doesn't hurt. Sadly, the upgrade department is very weird, with 9 out of 10 upgrades being fighter restricted, but Frenzy is solid. If you're gonna take something restricted, I would go with the ones for Sake and Garrek, namely the Berserk Charge and the Grizzly Trophy. You could probably make room for these let's move on to the rival decks and how they kind of pair up. Let's just skip past the Deadly Depths, and I probably will do that for all warbands in this series. Daring Delvers, this one rewards you for placing feature tokens, being in non-friendly territory with your explorers, that is, fighters that you have given upgrades with the explorer keyword on, or being on feature tokens with friendly fighters in non-friendly territory. All of this is possible with 5 fighters, and they have the move to get around. They just aren't very likely to stay around long enough to reap the rewards, and given the harsh faction search deck here, I reckon this one is maybe 1 or 2 searches short to complement this warband enough. It's not unthinkable or unplayable, it's just not very strong, and I think we need something a little bit better. Tooth and Claw, so we have a fighter with 3 damage off the bat with Sake, but then we have to inspire Garrek, which might go both slow or fast, depending on the opponent you're meeting, to have another one with this damage output, and the rest of them will struggle to put out good enough damage to consistently make this build work, in my opinion. Versus some warbands it will work beautifully, and you might kill skinks or skeletons left and right, even with Targor, Casus or Arnulf, but versus elite warbands your kill searches will be hard pressed to see completion, and with only 2 really dangerous fighters, the most deadly one being 1 dodge and 3 wounds, they will likely be targeted as to render your warband toothless. Which is why I think the Tooth and Claw is better suited for warbands with 3 or 4 slightly stronger fighters, rather than the 5+ ones. That being said, it's not the worst choice in the world, but it will likely be very matchup dependent and a bit of a swing and a miss, and I think it could certainly be pretty frustrating. The Fearsome Fortress, this deck is such an interesting deck in that it could pretty much work for any warband. Any warband could get fighters in the mid zone, place feature tokens or go on guard, but that being said, there's not a lot in their own deck that kind of overlaps the mechanic of this deck. Your own deck rewards you for being aggressive, killing and dying in equal measure, and although you have the bodies to spare initially, as I said with the Daring Delvers, you're gonna lose fighters in a steady pace, so it's really not the best fit for them. Certainly not unplayable though, as the Fearsome Fortress is just solid passive glory. The Beastbound Assault, this one is pretty decent actually. Dogged Determination suits them well. Just run one of your 2 wounders through a lethal hex and you're golden. Loyal Allies is pretty scoreable as well, with the cards in this deck to help you, and a lot of fighters generally. Unexpected End and We Stand Together should also be decently scoreable. Maybe we lack 1 more scoreable search here though. And the same goes for the end phases. It just about ends up short from being a really great fit, but it's still fairly solid. Seismic Shock will obviously be a pass. Korn is about as much anti-magic as you can get, and even if you don't care about the lore, there's little to no synergy here. The Toxic Terrors is better than one might first think upon first glance, but I think since they would more or less need to take the brunt of the searches here, that it's just a tad bit too weak for them. Carve a Path is a solid pick for a ranged warband leader, but Garrek is neither very survivable, nor is he likely to make more than 1 attack per round. I think it's not a hopeless, but I would argue it's a slightly worse pick than the Beastbound Assault. Voidcursed Thralls, now we're talking I think. And this one is actually a defensive buff for this warband, first off switching over from dodges to shields and making them immune to the drawback. Which is pretty minor though, given their low wounds, because they will probably be one-hitted most of them. Secondly, it kind of plays into what this warband will want to be doing anyway, moving forward and getting up close and personal. Involuntary Interdiction, Lashed into Motion, Perfect Thrall, Surrender at Will and Tipping Point are all scoreable searches, with Gathered Thralls being a bit of a stretch, but certainly not unscoreable. In the end phase, Uncounted Cost sort of mirrors Khorne Cares Not, and it begins with Unwitting Guardians and Unceasing Imperatives, pretty much 1 glory outscores. Forbidden Thralls should certainly be scoreable as well, while a Dark Horse Reshaped Realm might render you a lot of glory for doing things the Reavers does best, namely dying, which will make this card all the more scoreable. Lots of strong ploys to boost your accuracy, Voidcursed fighters, and provide free moves all help your game plan, while you will want to take the brunt of the upgrades from this deck, because A, so many faction upgrades are crap and or restricted, and B, these ones are pretty decent and necessary for the void cursing to be prevalent enough for this deck to really work. So I think it's a really decent fit for them. The Paths of Prophecy, not unthinkable with 5 fighters, but with a defense of 1 dodge and just not generally a deck that evolves around holding objectives or making you more defensive. I just think it's not the best fit, so let's move on. Force of Frost, sure, you can have a wizard with the Everwinter staff, but that's hardly much to build around, although Cold-Blooded and Break the Ice, Shield of the Grave, possibly some other stuff is scoreable. We need more synergy though to make these guys work really well. Breakneck Slaughter, we don't really need the extra move, to be fair, with 4 move from the bat and 5 inspired, but sure, it doesn't hurt. Pretty much all of the searches here are scoreable and fits the Reavers' general game plan, and with killing and dying as our main focus, being pushed around a bit doesn't much matter. Most of the end phases look fine as well, and we might even have the luxury of a predicament here regarding what to leave out. The Ploys gives a bit of accuracy and a bit of damage and a bit of push and a bit of move. A well-rounded Ploy deck that serves our game plan well. There's a lot of extra move naturally in the upgrade deck, which is maybe not super necessary in and of itself, but with extra benefits on all of those cards, like rewarding you with extra momentum counters and the like, they can still be very useful. Something to put on Garrek or Sake that could probably save one of these crucial fighters for the later rounds is the Moving Mark upgrade, so don't waste this one on one of your less useful fighters. I mean, Karsus is pretty decent as well. There are a couple of decent weapon upgrades here as well, which could be very useful to gear those weaker Dangle Bros up. So that's very useful and good stuff. I think it's a good fit for them. The Malevolent Masks, with this warband being in dire need of potent upgrades, I sadly don't think this is a good pairing. There's some very interesting stuff here for sure, like an upgrade that gives you an action, buffs damage, etc. But with a life expectancy of 1 charge, I think there are other warbands that could benefit more from this one. For me, the Breakneck Steelheart and the Voidcursed Thralls are without a doubt the best fit for Garrek's Reavers so far. But let's see what the future holds. So that's it for the first episode. Very interesting to start off with this series. I'm not sure I'm going to do all of the warbands, but I wanted to start off with these classic warbands from the first season at least. So let's see what we do next. Yeah. And before I go, I am going to let you have a peek at 2 example builds for these particular warbands here, so enjoy. This is Mats again, chiming in to thank you for watching the video. Please don't forget to subscribe, like and comment, and to not miss out on future content, ring the bell as well. And if you really liked this video, feel free to click the thanks button just below this video. And if you want to support me even further, you can now become a channel member and claim the title of Critical Focus fan. Until next time, take care, bye.